This is Ron Peters.
I'm John Nugent.
And I'm Sam Long.
Welcome to the After Class Podcast.
Because the best conversations happen
after class. Thanks for joining us on another episode of the After Class Podcast. We're glad to have you along. As many of you know, we here at the school do lots of fun things with the students. And so we thought,
do?
Well, sometimes.
Why doesn't anybody help me this kind of stuff?
Because it's fun. That's why we don't.
Oh, that's why it is. Don't bring in Ron.
We don't need Debbie Downer.
He will take away all the
Right.
fun. I'm kidding.
We all know you're a fun guy. Fun guy.
But you hate fun guy.
Yeah, I do hate fun guy.
Yeah.
What are we talking about? Oh,
it
yeah.
shouldn't be eaten. That's the point.
Right.
Mushrooms.
I mean,
Love fun guy.
Anyway.
I know, I've interrupted you. Sorry.
It's fine. What's new? And yeah, so one of the big events we have here on campus in the last few years is a thing called Armada-geddon.
Yeah.
And I'll do say this every year. Like, it's the language is making me want to talk about Armageddon. I always have to like actually stop and say which one is it. And then, anyway, Armada-geddon, the three different seafaring beasts of the world: Hydra, Megalodon, and Kraken. And we split about students into teams, throw some faculty on there, and it's kind of a mix of Amazing Race meets Survivor meets all sorts of fun. Anyway, it's a good time. It's a good weekend. It's for bonding early on the season. Semester.
Semester, right.
Yeah. So we had not updated what happened this year. And
some of us were less eager to do that than others.
Right. Let's say you were on a team that didn't win, John.
Right.
Let's say you were in last place from the beginning to the middle and to the very end. Yeah. Let's say you're on that team.
You might not want to talk about it. However, let's say you're on the team that won. You would be much more excited about talking about it.
Let's talk about that.
You're a little more vested.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
So the team that I was a part of, Hydra, did in fact win. This is my third win in 6 years, so that's pretty good for us. Kind of like we early on good, and then a lull, and then back again. So it was a great time. It was really well done. We did lots of different things between. There's a escape room, like team activities. There's always to build a boat and float it down the Grand River. Things like that.
Silent library.
Yeah. We don't want to talk about that.
No, we don't.
Because it's silent.
Oh, silent library.
Yes, silent library.
It was not a cause for great rejoicing for some of us.
Yeah. But it was great, and it was a fun time, and students had fun. And so, yeah.
The eating contest was a highlight for me.
Oh, the eating contest
brutal.
was great. That was fantastic.
Was it?
Yeah. We're probably not going to do that again because of the number of students who threw up.
Was there a lot of evacuation?
My entire team, all four of them, threw up.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Wow. That was one of the few events my team won. they were just like slow and steady.
Your team had the perfect strategy.
Yeah.
I was so impressed by the way they approached it.
Yeah. So. It was a great time.
And they had big eaters. I had 50-pound women eating, and it didn't go well.
So did any of your team evacuate after the...
Oh, no.
Oh, they so good.
Yeah, they did extremely well. And
and
when we looked at the different teams, we're like, we don't have much of a chance. But then, especially that middle team, we thought,
Megalodon.
3 big husky guys, you just thought they were going to devour it. Yeah. Except they did too fast.
Yes.
Right.
And that was the problem.
And you're right. Slow and steady wins a race. I was just watching that. And I tried to, I came back wearing the colors of each team because I didn't want to, commit to any team. I wanted to celebrate everybody and just be that guy. But I got to say, in the eating contest, I had to root for your team, John, because they just had the best strategy. And I'm looking around at the other teams going, you are going to fail. You're making a huge mess of your food and the table and your face. Yeah. And so it was very obvious who was going to win that one.
Yeah. So, Kraken won last year, so it's good that we get to share this year.
Sure.
So I think my team's won about 5 times, but I've been here a little bit longer than Sam, so I had more opportunities. So.
How did the name Armada get?
Well, I can tell you that.
I thought our listeners might want to know that.
We had the crew, which is our kind of student activities planning team, and at the time I was on the crew as kind of faculty representative, and we wanted to brand this event in some way that conveys both a large-scale battle and nautical themes.
Yeah.
And because we have these sea monsters and, Great Lakes and the lakes and stuff like that. And so we wanted to kind of brand it and make it feel Great Lakes-ish. And we just couldn't come up with words that conveyed a great battle at sea.
Yeah.
And I left the room and I told people, I'm going to come back with an idea. And I went back to my office. I sat there and I walked back into the room. I said, Armageddon. Combining a sea armada
Right.
with Armada or Armageddon.
Yeah.
So you have the
Armageddon.
problem slowing down to say Armageddon. I have the opposite problem. I can't say Armageddon anymore.
No, that is my problem.
Oh, you.
Yeah, I can't say Armageddon anymore.
Oh, Armageddon.
Oh,
I
has-
okay.
always say
yeah,
Armageddon.
Armageddon
Yeah, I
has
can't
become
do
more prominent. So it was a flash of inspiration,
Yeah.
and
The rest is
everyone
history.
knew.
It
Everyone
is.
knew when we walked back in that this is the title because I don't know.
Yeah,
Sea
it's good.
battle and
Right.
It's great.
And it works.
And the end
giant
battle.
epic battle. And it is.
giant.
It's a fun epic battle on campus, and it brings us all together, even as
does.
we're tearing at each other's throats.
Right.
Yeah, but it is a lot of fun for the students, and as a faculty member who's never been on a team, I love coming and cheering for everybody. Like I always tell people, as a participant, I shine the best on the sidelines. Like I just don't do well, but that's what I love to do. I love being there to cheer everybody on, see what's going on, and other people are like, "Dude, just be involved." And I'm like, "But this is what I want to do, and I love doing it."
Well, anyway, that came and gone, and hopefully next year's outcome will be different.
Disagree.
We
All
shall
right.
see.
Well, speaking of large-scale battles,
Another good segue. Yeah, I thought it was.
we are wrapping up our series on violence and peace in the Bible. And, the question that we had going into this is how do you wrap this up? We've been going for so many episodes. There's so much complex information that we've covered.
Yeah.
And we've decided that, we want to get to like the what would you do questions and the what if questions. But we want to, establish the framework that we're taking into those questions. And hopefully, maybe some of you caught this framework as we were working through the series. And that is, we don't want to approach the Bible, looking for, all right, where are the set of rules that we have to follow?
Mhm.
Because the Bible doesn't play nice with that kind of mentality.
It really doesn't.
And really what we find in the Bible is a trajectory of what God is doing in salvation history through his set apart people among the nations for his ultimate kingdom purposes. And we can tell that story in relation to peace and violence. And so we're going to just begin this episode by like recapping the Bible's story of like a skeletal
Mhm.
big picture salvation history view, and then transition to what does this mean for these specific questions that lots of people have. So if you'll bear with me, I'll try to
Yes.
concisely kind of state the high points of the story. And there's so many things that we overlooked, but that's why we have the previous 15 episodes, right?
Right.
Right, yeah.
So one of the things we get from the Old Testament, I'll start there, is that violence is a central part of how sin continues to break the world. It was there at the very beginning. It was the primordial sin. It was the challenge that God is facing with the flood. It's a big deal. And as a part of God's response to what violence does to the world, he creates a people to which he calls not to participate in the violence that typifies life among the nations. So not to participate in the machinations of warfare like the nations do. But God does take this responsibility for vengeance, because Israel, if they're not going to take worldly militarism into their own hands, then what's going to happen when people go after them? And how are they going to take possession of the promised land? How are they going to get freed from Egypt? Well, God takes it upon himself to wage the battles for his people.
Yeah.
And to take credit for the victory. And it's very important to him that they don't take credit for the victory.
Right. That's a big part of the story.
A big theme in Exodus, in Numbers, in Joshua, Judges, and going forward. God appears at the same time to be freely using the sword-wielding ways of the nations to serve various purposes throughout the world. While he does not want his people to get all too comfortable with the sword and nation building and kingship like the nations, he tends to use nations like Babylon or Assyria or Persia and their swords to accomplish purposes that are important for salvation history, like freeing the Israelites from the Assyrians, freeing them from the Babylonians, helping them rebuild their city back in the land. So God doesn't seem to have this allergy to everyone using the sword to accomplish his purposes, although he tends to really be selective and persnickety when it gets to his own people using it.
Well, and if I can just throw a real quick point in there, God's not afraid either to say to the nations, "You've gone too far."
Yeah.
You know, Babylon and Assyria, like God's like, "Okay, I'm going to use you to accomplish my purposes," but then they exceed their mandate, and it's usually in the form of violence. And he goes, "That's not what I wanted you to do." And I think that's also an important point to make in that.
Yeah, just because he uses the nations, they don't get a blank check.
Right. Yeah.
There's accountability and consequences. Yeah, that's important. When Israel chooses to be like the nations, continuing the story, with their nationalism and militarism, God totally strips them of king, army, and national independence and begins reshaping them for his mission for them from a posture of weakness and full dependence upon him.
Another very important point to keep in mind because that goes back to what you were saying earlier, John. Like, even with God bringing Israel into the land of Canaan, he wanted to be able to say, "I gave this to you. You did not go in there and conquer this land and take it for yourself. I gave it to you. You are the weak ones. I'm the one who fights your battles for you." And so when Israel tries to become strong like the nations, God has to pull them back. "That's not what I wanted for you." And so operating from a position of weakness has always been the plan for Israel so that God can be revealed through them. And so when they go too far and they're failing, but trying to be strong, God's like, "This is not the plan, and we've got to dial this back so that I can be the God that I want to be and be revealed in you." So, important point.
So out of this, a sort of two kingdoms framework emerges. And we haven't used this language throughout the podcast, but it's kind of classic Christian language. It has a place back in historical Catholic theology and Protestant theology. But that is, basically by the end of the Old Testament, it seems very clear that God uses the kingdoms of this world as kind of his stewards for overseeing the order of preservation. And that's kind of a theological framework. There's God's order of preservation by which he preserves a basic level of order in a chaotic world that tends toward violence. And so he uses the nations and the sword among the nations to preserve some semblance of order. It kind of maintains a certain tolerable level of peace and violence in the world. But what it doesn't do, and that's all it can do, it can kind of keep evil and wickedness at bay. But what it can't do is create a new peaceful kingdom-like order. And that's what he never tries to do that with the nations. They're not the creators of his new kingdom order. They are the preservers of a certain tolerable level of evil and wickedness in the world that is enough for humans throughout the world to kind of eke out an existence and a living for them. And it creates space for his set-apart people to represent his kingdom. So there's the kingdoms of the world that God uses to preserve things. And there's the kingdom people of God that he uses in the order of redemption or not preserving the old order, but kind of ushering in a new order, pointing toward a new and better order, which the Bible comes to refer to as the kingdom of God.
Just a thought on that. Again, I'm sorry to interrupt you there, but it just popped in my head. It's germane to what you're saying there. When God, confused the languages of people at the Tower of Babel, you have a people who are collaborators, and God's like, whatever they choose to do, they're just going to accomplish it. And so when do we use the language, God is sort of using these nations to maintain this sort of equilibrium, or by confusing them, he just sets in motion something that he knows is going to work on its own. That it's not even that I have to use it because this is why God can, go after them when they exceed their mandate. He's like, I'm going to create just enough confusion and to a degree enough competition rather than collaboration that nobody's ever really going to get the upper hand. As soon as somebody starts getting to be a little bit too strong, there will be enough resistance to bring that, person or that empire down. Is God really using them, Or did he just set something in motion that he knows is pretty much going to take care of itself? So that in the meantime, he can create a new people. The creator God keeps on creating and creates a new people who will offer an alternative to that to say, this is a failed system and God has something better in mind.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the Babel account is all about this.
Yeah.
It is how God creates a system of checks and balances throughout the world with nations who have different cultures and languages and
Yeah.
ways of life to preserve and to advocate and to protect against others. And so it's the opposite of empire. Like
Mhm.
Babel, if they succeed in creating this city, this unified city with a one world order, right?
Right.
Then that will lead, God knows, to oppression.
Yeah.
And so scattering, the confusing of language, the multiplication of cultures. This is about the God taking credit for the shape of this world as a plurality of competing nations.
Yeah.
And that serves his purpose for the order of preservation.
Yeah. It keeps us from getting to another flood situation.
Exactly.
Yeah. And again, it's not a perfect solution, but it minimizes the damage.
But for his people, I mean, he has a different fundamental calling. He can use any old nation to maintain and preserve order in the world, keep, the most violent offenders off the road, and Greg corrected me. He said I shouldn't refer to this as the Freddy Krueger violent people. He said it's be the Mike Myers, because Freddy Krueger lurks in people's dreams and stuff like that. But Mike Myers is the one who runs around killing people.
Okay.
But point granted.
Thanks, Greg. Appreciate
We should
that.
know our horror movies better.
Right.
Well, if anybody's going to know his horror movies, Greg is.
But
He
the
knows
reality
horror
is God wanted his set-apart people to serve a different purpose, and that is to be a light to the nations, to be an example of God's better way.
Yeah.
And so it's not really the order of preservation to which his people have been called. It's the order of redemption, him redeeming this fallen, broken, violent creation and turning it into something new and good and beautiful. That's the kingdom purpose of the set-apart people. And so you kind of see this framework emerging out of the Old Testament. It's presumed in the prophets. And as we'll see, it continues in the New Testament. So that's kind of my summary of the Old Testament trajectory. And if you were to talk chronologically where the Old Testament ends, chronological, it's probably with the book of Daniel, which is a depiction of the nations who are chaotically ruling the world, and these various visions of how God will bring those nations down and hand his kingdom over to his people, his set-apart people who become the future of civilization. And his people in this book are called to radical faithfulness despite the violence that's perpetrated against them. And they are represented in Daniel 12 by martyrs who are victims to the nations overusing their power on loan from God to preserve order. They become menacing beasts, right, that oppress people and oppress God's people. And God's answer is, be faithful to the point of death, and you'll be vindicated in the resurrection, and you will inherit the kingdom that I'm establishing throughout the world.
Yeah, image bearing to them becomes the sword. When God says, your job is to take care of the earth, rule the earth and subdue it. They're like, sweet, let's go around killing people. That's their vision of what it means to be image bearers. And God's like, oh my gosh, that is not what being an image bearer is all about. I need to create a people who have a better vision of what that is. And so, yeah, it's a radical abuse of what God has entrusted humanity with.
Yeah. And from a chronological perspective, that's the last word of the Old Testament, right? I mean, most scholars would say that the last parts of Daniel probably date to the 2nd century, right? Even if apocalyptically they're being seen from the vantage point of the 6th century. So where does the New Testament pick up? Well, the conviction is that Messiah has come, the one like the Son of Man in the clouds who represents the people of God and the new order God is bringing. Jesus is the Messiah that Daniel tells people to suffer to the point of death. But wait, God's kingdom is coming. Right. Jesus claims to be the one bringing that kingdom.
Yep.
And as he brings the kingdom, he subverts all expectations of a militant Messiah that's going to bring God's kingdom through kingship like the nations, violent military force. Everyone's in agreement on that point.
Right.
Jesus also makes radical forgiveness, non-retaliation, and suffering, persecution, a prominent part of his discipleship ethos. So it's not just a way that the Messiah is going to uniquely bring the kingdom. It is a kind of ethos that is to typify the life of the kingdom people who are going to be serving that kingdom that he brings not by force. He raises up a people to promote that kingdom not by force.
Yeah.
And preserve that kingdom not by force. This aspect of Jesus' teaching and example is picked up all throughout the New Testament letters of the church. And so we can't say that, suffering to the point of death, that was a unique Jesus calling because he had to die on the cross to atone for the sins of the world.
Yeah.
That's precisely, if you look at all the passages where we're called to imitate Jesus, it's in his radical love for others, laying down his life for them,
Yep.
suffering to the point of death, making the hard choices
Yeah.
that lead to pain on your part.
Yep.
That part of Jesus' witness is important for Christians and not unique to Jesus. So, in addition to that, God reconfigures the church permanently, and this is a very important point. He reconfigures the church permanently as a trans-territorial entity. That is, go make disciples of all nations. We want to fill every nation of the world with God's people, which is a way of saying God's people is no longer a Palestine-centered people all huddling around Jerusalem as if the whole world that's going to be like the glorious city and everyone's going to stream there.
Yeah.
That's not it. The motion goes out,
Yeah.
and we become a trans-territorial people. And that people has no recourse to the sword to advance or to protect the Christian community and its mission. They go out as a disarmed people. Their weapons are not the weapons of this world. And, that's pretty clear in Paul, in Ephesians, right? But their weapon is the sword of the Spirit, the Word of God, the Word of truth. And so there's an expectation that as they go out to the world unarmed to represent and inaugurate and welcome God's new kingdom of peace that Jesus brought, they're going to face opposition. People are going to persecute them. They're going to reject them. They're going to take advantage of them. And there's a constant stream of teaching of saying, yep, you're going to suffer for this, just like Jesus did. And you need to bear under it just like he did. You're not to retaliate like Jesus didn't retaliate, right? And it's going to hurt. But that's not the end. God will see your pain. He will see your identity with his son. He will see that you are a kingdom ambassador. And the promise that culminates in Revelation is, and those who suffered for the Christian mission, for the faith, have prominent places in the resurrection and the new order that God is bringing. That permanent reconfiguration dispels all notions of rebuilding a kind of Christian state or a Christian nation that then, by virtue of being tied to territory, like Israel, has to come up with some kind of military strategy, whether it's Yahweh war or some other kind of warfare. But no, you're not going to be tied to any nation, so you can forget about the whole military building strategy.
Yeah. What boundaries do we have to protect? I mean, we are a global kingdom, and so we do not have any territory to protect.
Yeah,
and
so
it's a very different way of thinking.
Yeah, and then we can never think of another nation as an enemy.
Right.
That's the key thing. Like Israel, because they were tied to the land of Israel, the nation of Israel, can think of Syria, Egypt, Babylon as enemies to God's people. The church, being trans-territorial, can never think of another territory as an enemy to God's people.
Yeah.
Because, right now there's a war going on between Hamas, right, and Israel, and so you have, the Gaza Strip. It's like we have Christians there in the Gaza Strip, and we have Christians there in Israel.
Right.
And we have Christians in the nations that are allies to Israel, and we have Christians in the nations that are allies to Hamas.
Yeah.
Right. And so it gets really tricky. Like, which side are Christians on? Well, we're a part of the trans-territorial people that are in all of these nations.
Yeah.
And we want peace and tranquility for all of them. And we want God to use the powers and principalities, the sword-bearing nations to keep in check the evil and the acts of terror. And so But of course, we don't want civilians getting caught up in the crossfire. Like,
Yeah.
we're not on. We can't be on the side of any national political entity because we're a trans-territorial entity, and that trans-territorial reality is our allegiance, is our side.
Yeah.
And so many of the questions that people have and confusion they have stem from a confusion of that reality.
Yep.
I think that's spot on because of what you just said. I love what you just said there because so many Christians don't think there are people in Gaza who worship the same God I do, who are part of that same kingdom. There are people living there who are my brothers and sisters and fellow citizens. And on the other side in Israel, there are people who worship the same God and the same Jesus and same fellow citizens. I'm on both of their sides. I love them. They're my brothers and sisters. It doesn't matter if it's Russia or Ukraine. There are people on both sides who worship the same God, same Jesus, part of the same kingdom. How can I pick sides when I love them both equally and they're my fellow citizens? And once you begin to think in those terms, you can't look at those conflicts the same way. And like I said, I just think there are a lot of Christians who haven't taken that step to ask those kinds of questions. But I beg people, ask those questions because it is going to change the way you think.
Yeah. And last point, it's kind of that continues and brings to an end the biblical trajectory, is that two kingdoms framework that we talked about, kind of emerging from the Old Testament, seems to continue in the New Testament, where God uses governing authorities. We saw this in Romans, right? To keep evil in check. He continues to do that after the Messiah comes and after the kingdom people begins. God continues using governing authorities, even the Romans ones that are persecuting Christians and are really the rival kingdom to the kingdom of God in the first century time. God still uses the Romans to try to keep peace throughout the world, even though they're trying to build empire like Babylon, like Babel, right?
Yeah.
He still uses them to keep evil in check, and he still calls the kingdom community his set-apart people, then Israel, now the church, to overcome evil with good and to forgive and reconcile the worst of sinners. And so the New Testament takes a stronger stance. I mean, at the Old Testament, the two kingdoms framework is kind of like there's them, the nations of the world that keep peace and end up using the sword to do that, to hold each other in check. And then there's us that try to like bear witness to this peaceful order and to be an alternative kingdom to that. But enmity, the violence in the world, Israel really didn't have any proactive calling from God concerning. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
After he kind of rids the land of Canaan of the people there, like God's people are never his instrument of ridding the world of evil. Mm-hmm. The two kingdoms in the New Testament kind of changes a little bit because while God is still using the empires of the world to keep evil at bay, keep it in check, he's still using his people to bear witness to a different order, the kingdom of God. There's a third dimension, which is that we have a stance toward evil now. We overcome it with good.
Right.
Like, because the mission to the Gentiles has begun, we're not just one territory in Palestine. We can't just have the perfect little city here and people stream to us.
Right.
We're going out to them, which means we're going amidst in the thick of evil.
Yeah.
And what is our job there is to overcome evil with good. The way Jesus overcame evil with good in his earthly ministry, the way the apostles in New Testament church was called to overcome evil with good. So we have a role in the fight against evil.
Right.
And it's to love enemies, to heap burning coals on their heads, whatever that means, right? And then to turn the enemy, the foe, into the friend, the fellow believer, the kingdom citizen.
Yeah.
And so we have an additional role, I think, that Israel didn't have in the old two kingdoms framework.
Yeah.
All right. So that's a biblical trajectory.
Yes.
Sam, you haven't talked in a while.
I haven't. You told me not
Thoughts
to
about
early on.
It didn't stop Ron.
No,
It never
I know.
stops me.
No,
I am not afraid
I gave
of
him the
it.
evil eye, but he ignored it.
Notice I was looking at John the whole time.
Yeah. Yes.
Avoid contact with Sam.
Yeah. So a couple things. So you may have. So what you've laid out is the ideal, right? That this is how God wanted to work in the world, and you could point to lots of times in the story where that didn't work out, where humans took it upon themselves. And so just because, the whole prescription, description situation, just because there are times in the Bible you could point to poke holes, say, well, this didn't do it, this didn't work then, We understand that, right? But this is the trajectory that God is moving toward. And so we spent like, I don't know, 25 episodes looking at all those passages. And like I said, you can go back and listen to how we discussed those, but you don't throw out the trajectory because of some stupid humans in the Bible story. I just want to put that out there at the front end.
Yeah, the fact that Esther married a Persian king,
Right.
who then used violence to stop the genocide of Jews, doesn't make this overall trajectory go away.
Right.
Right.
And well, this would be a topic for a whole other thing. There's lots of issues in the Bible that are like that, that are moving in a direction, that are culminated in God's kingdom, that hasn't, in the early parts of the Bible, hasn't happened yet. Anyway, so there's that, and the other is just like this idea of people keep trying to use like new wine in old wineskins, or whatever. Like the idea of like they keep going back to a time and place that we have moved past. And so the point of laying out the story is to say, this is where we're at now. Why would you put yourself back then? And so that's I think that'll lead to, when we talk about some questions, like you citing examples from certain points in the history are not appropriate because we're not in that point in salvation history anymore. And so
and when we see something in the story that looks like an exception, okay, well, that's just what it is. It's the exceptional moment. And again, like the story of Esther, an exceptional moment in which she's not really in a lot of control over what's happening in her life. And being married to somebody who's not a believer, like this is an exceptional situation. And so we don't take exceptions and turn those into the rule. We recognize this is a weird moment where things aren't quite going right to begin with, and God is preserving his people through this situation. But it's not the people he wanted us to become. Okay, Esther marrying a Persian king is not the people that we want to become. God is trying to create a radically different people who reject the way the world does things and offer them this different alternative. And we need to commit ourselves to that and not to these weird tangents that emerge along the way.
And anyway, the questions we're about to ask and people to ask of this topic, it calls for discernment. We have Daniel and we have Esther. They're two very different approaches to how you live in the circumstances, right? And so, like, it's not hard and fast like we would like it to be, right? And let's keep that in mind as we go through the many questions we have. Speaking of questions, so all what you say is true, John, about we're going to this trajectory where we have these two kingdoms. We're part of the kingdom of love and forgiveness and radical sort of kindness. Should we embrace pacifism language? Right. So should all Christians be, quote, pacifists? And I guess we need to unpack what that word means and whether we should adopt it or not. I would have a response early on. So for me, pacifism means doing nothing. Right. That's the idea of, so in the context of this, if there's violence enacted upon you, you just lay there and get the crap beat out of you or get shot or whatever happens. Right. That we're so anti-violence that we would not even come near it. That, for me, that's what I think of when I think of pacifism. The problem is that's not what I think of when I think of God's kingdom, right? That's not what it means to be like, kingdom of power and might. So we got to reconcile these two things. And so I don't like pacifism language. I find it to be, like I said, it evokes these ideas of not doing anything when in fact we are called, radical forgiveness and love is an action. Yeah. Right? It's not a passive activity. And so we need to figure out what does it look like to do something in response to these things that are not violent. Yeah. And so I'm a nonviolent guy, not a pacifist guy. How about you all?
Yeah, I agree 100%. I had this conversation with somebody just recently who said, are we supposed to be pacifists? Are you a pacifist? I said, no. Everything to me is an active response. I just don't act with violence, but I am still acting. I'm taking action because the action is to represent God's kingdom. And so when I'm faced with a violent confrontation, can I actively respond in a way that doesn't require a violent response? And so, pacifist is just a horrible word to describe what we're trying to do as believers. No, I am taking an active response that doesn't require me to be violent.
Yeah. In defense of the term pacifism, I don't like using the word either. Yeah. Because I think when people, I think it's, if you study pacifists, like you get into like the people who are the best representation of it, the most, you take the best representatives and their view of it to represent something,
Sure.
not this,
Not the worst.
not the worst. And
Which is
I
what the
think,
world likes to do.
I think most people who take pacifism seriously in an intellectually rigorous, serious way, and it's certainly most Christian pacifists, they do not think of it as do-nothingism.
Right.
That's not their view,
Mhm.
because Jesus is their standard, and Jesus did anything but nothing.
Right.
Right. And and the problem is it sounds like passivism.
Right.
Right. Passiv, passivism, which is do-nothingism. I cannot, like you guys, I would never want to associate myself with a word that means being passive and just sitting there and watching evil happen and do nothing. That would never. There's nothing in the Bible that would recommend that.
Yeah.
But the word pacifism is PAC, which is from Latin PAX, right? Pax, which is the word for peace. It literally means peace advocates, peace fighters, those who fight for peace, those who are waging war on violence and being active for peace. And so I would say most peace advocates would say that's their definition of pacifism, and that they would want to distance themselves from passivism, which is a totally different word.
Yes.
But yeah, so I think Christians, I think for Christian who claims to be a pacifist, and they're going to define that as active participation in promoting God's reign and working hard toward reconciliation and getting into the mix of things as a peace proponent, if that's your definition of pacifism, then that word does good work for them.
Yeah.
But so many people hear passive, and so that makes it a word that could be good, but really functionally in most contexts isn't. But if you're among Mennonites and you use that word, and they would all embrace pacifism, it's of the active variety.
Right.
And so we need to be careful to assume that someone who claims the term is of the do-nothing variety.
Yeah, it's the classic problem of our age where words don't mean what they used to mean, or people don't know what they mean, and so they base it on connotation, not denotation, and so we're left with, So I mean, really, it's living out. Blessed are the peacemakers.
Exactly.
That's what a pacifist is.
Pacifist with a C means peacemaker.
Yeah.
And can you be a Christian without being a peacemaker? I don't think so.
Not at all. Yeah.
I mean, if you ignore the New Testament, you could.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. If you want to be a Christian in definition only and not really embracing what Jesus taught us, then yeah, sure, why not? And there are a lot of people out there who certainly fit that definition.
So for me, that leads to the next question is, so what does that active, nonviolent activity look like? And so and the classic example is someone breaks into your home and is going to do ill to your family. What does it look like to, whether we call personal self-defense or whatever, like how do you non-violently actively do something?
Yeah. Yeah. And just to create a hypothetical situation, you're at home, somebody bursts in, they want your TV, they want your stereo, they want your money, whatever, like give me your stuff. In that moment, I think what we are called to do is not say, how do I protect my stuff? The question is, how do I represent God in his kingdom? How do I represent God to this intruder or a group of intruders who want my stuff? And I just think there's so many things that factor into that. Number one, it's not my stuff. Okay, it might have my name on the ownership of it, but it belongs to God. And so they're not taking my stuff, they're taking God's stuff. And it's not my job to protect God's stuff. But it is my job to, in that moment, somehow represent God. And can we say in that moment, I'm not going to resist you on this. If you want my stuff that bad, you can have my stuff. I'm not sure, I wouldn't know until I'm actually in the situation.
Right.
Okay, so I can't, lay it out.
But excuse me, Mr. Thief, can we have a conversation about?
Yeah, can I talk to you about Jesus right now? It's that might not be the thing. But in that rare situation, you don't know. You just don't know how responding in a way that de-escalates it might not create an opportunity to represent Jesus. Where somebody comes in and you're like, no problem, bro. Yeah, like I said, I can't predict what's going to happen there. But how can I represent Jesus in a way that doesn't require me to shed blood, take life, or whatever?
Yeah, that's a really important part of the answer is that however we do in that situation, we do not take off our Jesus hat and our Bible hat and everything we've been talking about hat and say, well, first and foremost, I got to get out of here alive. That's a very worldly view of why you exist in the world. We have to engage that question as a Christian.
Yeah.
And we don't know all the variables going into it. But one of the things as a Christian, we believe that whoever is stepping foot on our property is someone who is created in God's image, who is dearly beloved by God, that God wants them to become a part of his people, their life to be transformed, the brokenness that's leading them to this activity. He wants to bring healing to that.
Yeah.
And so the first thing we do is we don't accept worldly descriptions. The person who breaks into my property, into my house, is pure evil in a kind of black and white situation of you're either all good or all evil, and then you're presumed to be all good in that situation, and they're presumed to be all evil in that situation. That justifies you just treating them like they're not human, like they're disposable or expendable. So we would have to, whoever we respond is out of the conviction that they are a broken creature of God that God wants to woo to himself, and that we in that situation are the peacekeepers, right? Peacemakers, who have an opportunity to shine God's light in that situation and to overcome evil with good. And so I think we go forward with the armor of God. We go forward with all the resources of our faith. We go forward with our love and our hospitality to strangers. We do not go forward in a way that denies them their humanity, whatever we do.
Yeah, and I think that what's important about that is this radical transformation and how we view situations. Because we have this view that we get from the world, where it's my place that I got to defend, and you're the bad guy coming through my door. But like it makes me think about Paul in Philippians 1, where the Philippians are like, oh, Paul, we're so sorry you're arrested. You know, you're being shamed, and you don't get to preach the gospel with the freedom you want. And Paul's like, I see it differently. This is great. You know, I'm preaching the gospel. People know that I'm here because of the gospel, and I'm inspiring other people to be more bold for the gospel. He's like, don't see this as bad. See this as good. And he radically transforms the way that his circumstances should be viewed. And that's just one example of how the gospel should radically change how we view people and relationships and situations. And so if your mindset is, the listener, if your mindset is, hey, this is my place that I've got to protect, what I'm encouraging you to do is say, how does God want me to transform how I view my home, my stuff, and that potential intruder who might come in and want to take my stuff? Like God wants to transform that so that you see it through a radically different set of eyes. And that transformation will allow us to be the people of God and represent his kingdom to everybody we come into contact with.
And at the same time, if my house has other people in it, they're made in God's image too, and dearly beloved. So there is that question of, what do you do about the threat to other people who might be in your house? Sam.
Yeah. I think that's what most of the listeners are waiting for. Like, what are we actually doing? Are you just going to pray for them and read scripture to them? Because that sounds like what we're talking about here. And so is there more to it than that? And is there a place for levels of violence? Like, is there any room for, okay, I'm not going to shoot them, and no, I'm not going to beat them to submission, but can I restrain them? Can I, can I do something else? Can I put them in a full Nelson, maybe a headlock? Like, what do we, and so
Figure
like,
four.
Yes. The figure four. Brett the Hitman Hart.
Apparently, I missed out on something.
There's wrestling moves.
WWF.
Yeah.
And
so like for me, like that's where I'm at. Like, I think it should all be done with the spirit you all have just talked about. But what does that look like? Is it violence to restrain someone from committing other violence on myself, on other people?
Yeah, and there's a difference, and I think important, between violence and physicality. When a kid is about to walk in front of a bus, and you see that they're about to get run over, and you like tackle that kid to the ground before they reach the sidewalk, right? Yeah. And then the kid like breaks their arm or bruises their head. Like, did you violate them, right? Yeah. No, you were physical with them. You were even rough with them, right? But you, for their own safety, right, took them out of a situation where they were about to destroy their life.
Yeah.
So I can imagine a scenario where, Like I would definitely want, like when I think of the innocent people in the house, I think of what God does when he looks at his innocent creatures who are being violated by the evils of this world. Christ came and got in between us. He got in between us and the other who was the enemy of the gospel, and he gave his life. So I would think that I would lay down my life for whoever's in my house, right? So that they might be kept safe. You know, I would go toward, right, the intruder in a way that frees up other people to get away and to go to a place that might be safe. And I don't see how tackling someone who's about to do something that's about to destroy their life is bad. Like this guy can go from being an intruder and a thief to being a murderer, which is bad for his life. If I can tackle him to the ground and, you know, kick the gun out of the way and restrain him and buy time for my wife to call the police, right, then I've actually done something that is loving for the intruder and for my family, and that works within the realm of Christian mission. And you know, and how I talk to that person should be out of gospel, out of love. What are you doing, man? I know you can't want this. What is happening here? And you know, and there are plenty of case studies. You know, we always assume that, you know, the two options are shoot and kill the person, or just let them destroy everyone in the house.
Right.
But there are serious case studies where people have gone after intruders with scripture and prayer, and then the intruder leaves or drops their gun and gets out of there. Like there is power in the word of God. There is power in prayer. Like most people don't break into a house thinking, I want to run into people. Like, if they're there to steal your TV, they're not thinking, I want to run into people and kill them.
Right. They're hoping no one's there.
Right.
Yeah, right.
And then, oh, shoot, there are people there. Probably what they want more than anything is to get out of the house alive. Like mission aborted. This wasn't what I thought it was. I'm getting out of here. That's what they want. If you come loaded with your gun, and what if you miss?
Right.
And they have a gun. Now they're shooting back, and your wife or your child or, you know, your house guest or yourself could be killed when you didn't have to be, because you escalated violence with the attempted superior violence, except you failed. Like in all these situations, like the potential person protecting our house is a sharpshooter who never misses.
Yeah. That's always the scenario. And they're like, oh, well, you don't have to shoot to kill, you know, try to maim them. No one who knows anything about guns thinks that that's what happens. There's not some sense of clarity in the moment. That's not what happens.
Oh, it's not clarity without a doubt. Yeah.
Yeah, that's always the best case scenario for the person. Yeah, it's insane.
Yeah, but what if you said, "Hey, my hands are empty. I'm not here to hurt you. You probably don't want me here. You probably didn't think I was here. I'm giving you a chance to leave."
Yeah.
Right? What if you did that? And what if you tell them, God loves you. He wants more for you than this. Don't do this.
Right.
You're throwing your life away. Right? How can I help you? Is there something you need?
Right.
Right? That I might give you instead of you having to take it from me. Because we can do that too. Right? You know, it's kind of like the turn the other cheek. How do we turn it from they're taking away your dignity to no, you're giving, you know, they're making you walk a mile. Well, hey, I'll walk the second mile with you. Like, take control of the situation by being a radically generous Christian. And knowing that anything you give to them, God is going to restore to you hundredfold. Like, because his boundless riches, you don't have to worry about your future.
We are over time. We still have a couple of questions we haven't even got to yet, but we're definitely over time here. So I guess we have to come back and do one more episode. Where we
Maybe. We'll talk about it.
I don't know.
I think we set a framework that the rest can be built off of.
We'll see about that. I guess you're going to have to come back next week and find out what we're going to do here, because we'll have a conversation about it.
Until then, thank you for joining us for this episode of the After Class Podcast. After Class because
the best conversations happen.
After class?